guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Welcome, fellow 10Xing leaders. So great to be back with you on another episode of Modern Leadership. Short intro today because I'm jazzed to introduce our guest and author of this month's book club book, Mike Michalowicz. He is awesome, and it's a real treat to have him along for the ride. But how about a formal introduction? Mike is the entrepreneur behind 3 multi-million-dollar companies and is the author of 4 business essential books, Surge, Profit First, The Pumpkin Plan, and what BusinessWeek deemed an entrepreneur's cult classic, The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. Mike is formerly a small business columnist for the Wall Street Journal, you probably heard of that, and business makeover specialist on MSNBC. But today, he spends most of his time traveling the world as entrepreneurial advocate, speaking to groups like us. He's globally recognized as the guy who challenges outdated business beliefs, the status quo, and teaches us what we do about it. I cannot wait to jump in. Mike, how are you? Welcome to the Modern Leadership Podcast.
I am doing well, Jake, and a big shout out across the pond to you today.
Yeah, it's been so fun to be able to talk back and forth to people who are, all over the world and in different places. And in your intro, I mentioned that you are quite the author. I mean, you've written 4 books, and I call them business essentials. And today I want to tackle 2 of those, Profit First and The Pumpkin Plan. And as I mentioned in the intro, the reason for this is because every month we select one book that we want to deep dive into. I mean, we really want to understand it. And I think too much today because of the ability to listen on, 3x speed, that we're just glossing over these books. And it's my belief that we really need to dive into them. So I want to take some time with you today while we've got your ear and really dive into 2 of your books. Does that sound like a plan?
Oh yeah, I love it. Let's do it.
All right. And the reason I mentioned this to you, the reason we picked up Profit First is it's brand new, expanded and revised. And by the way, I read both of them cover to cover in the last 2 weeks, and they are phenomenal. I want to start with Profit First. So Profit First, transform your business from cash-eating monster to money-making machine. And you start out, Mike, with this quote that is scary and really sticks with us. It says this: 8 out of 10 businesses fail, and the number one reason they fail is lack of profitability. You go on to say that the concept of pay yourself first meets small plate servings, meets grandma's envelope management system. That's what Profit First is. So if we want to grow the fastest, healthiest growth companies, what is this Profit First idea?
Yeah, so we have to challenge the normal approach to business, clearly, because 8 out of 10 businesses are running out of money. And here's the irony, Jake. The other 2 that survive are surviving check by check. They're barely above water. So it's a scary environment out there for most businesses. I suspect most people listening right now, if they own a business, it's probably surviving check by check, meaning if they don't make a sale today, they are out of business tomorrow, or at least they can't pay the rent, payroll, and so forth. So what I propose is don't do what everyone else is doing. It ain't working. Let's not follow the herd. Let's try something new. And what the herd is doing is the classic old formula to profitability. Sales minus expenses equals profit. What that means is you got to sell, make revenue, you got to incur expenses to grow and support that revenue, and what's left over is profit. And while logically that makes so much sense, it is behaviorally flawed beyond belief because the profit never comes. It's the ultimate kick the can down the road game. Profit doesn't happen today, nor this month, nor the end of the year, but maybe one time in the future. And we're waiting for one big client to swoop in or one major event to finally turn us to be profitable. What I propose in Profit First is that we do exactly that. We take our profit first. Flip the formula. Now I'm saying it's sales minus profit equals expenses. And what that means is every time a sale comes in, we take a predetermined percentage. We pick it, but it can be 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20, 50%. We pick a percentage. In the beginning, I suggest definitely choose lower until we build our profit muscle, but take that percentage and then immediately allocate that money to a profit account. Hide it away. This is the old pay yourself first principle you're referring to We do this in our personal lives. I'm saying now apply this in business. And when you take your profit first, you're basically reverse engineering that profitability. You have to find a way to sustain it. You have to find more innovative and more frugal ways to run your business as a result.
Well, how about if we're starting out? What if we're just building a business from scratch right now and we're looking at, our opportunities in that? We don't have any, our cells are so small that we need all of our cells to meet our expenses.
So this, ironically, is the best time to do it because this is a percentage-based system. Now, it's not only a profit allotment. When you do the full implementation of profit first, there's a pay account to pay you, the business, the most important employee. There's a tax account to reserve money for your tax liabilities that will inevitably come from the government at the end of the year. And there's one running the business itself, the operating expenses. So if you only make $1, you still allocate based upon percentages. So maybe you're putting 1% to profit to start. Well, that means there's a penny going there, and maybe it's 20% going to owner's pay, so 20 cents is going there. No matter what your income level is, we need to implement the system. And when you start when the earlier you start, the better, because now you're baking this habit into your business from the get-go. It is forcing smart decision-making from the get-go. It's forcing profitability from the get-go.
And I love this concept, and you talk about this with kids, and it's really this idea you start out and you develop these habits, this routine, and then when you have more profit, well, then you're moving forward. You're really working. And so I love this idea. Now, we only have a little bit of time to jump into these topics. So there's 4 topics I want to focus on: Parkinson's Law, perfectionism, debt, and being the best. And so let's start with Parkinson's Law. From your book, you talk about if there's one thing that will forever change your relationship with money, it is the understanding of Parkinson's Law. You need to intentionally make less money available to operate your business. And this seems so wildly out of sync with what we know.
So Parkinson's Law, and this is the doozy of a one, but so critical, is he was a philosopher from the 1950s, who identified that it's human behavior to expand our demand for something based upon supply. Meaning the more available it is, the more we automatically consume of it. And the example I use in the book is about toothpaste. A full tube of toothpaste, we use a lot of toothpaste. An empty one, well, we squeeze it and twist it and turn it, and we use less toothpaste. So when there's less of a resource, Parkinson states that we become more frugal and, most importantly, more innovative. We find new ways to extract it. Here's the deal with money. If I gave you, to start your business, $100,000, I am sure you'd find a way to spend that money. You justify it through ads. And why not run an ad in a magazine for the target market and all this stuff, get the best equipment. But if you were given, say, $1,000 to start the business, you can't afford those ads. You can't afford things, but you need to get the word out. Now you're going to find innovative ways of marketing. Actually, one company did this. That was a pizza shop. And they said, we can't even afford a yellow page ads if we take our profit first. So what they did, and talk about innovation, they found all the numbers of pizza stores around them that went out of business. They then called the local phone company and said, would you redirect their old phone numbers to us? Because those pizza shops still had ads running in the yellow pages, even though with disconnected numbers. Their phone started ringing instantly. And they said, hey, we're not the pizza shop you're calling. They're out of business, but we'll serve your order. The deal with Parkinson's Law is less money forces frugality, which is critical for every business, but most importantly, it forces you to find new ways to get the same results, and innovation always sparks growth.
Oh, I love that. And, I didn't remember that story, and it just rings so clear that when you're thinking outside the box, opportunities open up. The second thing I wanted to talk about from Profit First is this idea that perfectionism kills every dream. You talk about this in relation to setting up percentages for the named accounts, and we talked about, the 5 accounts. You have to read the book to really get this picture. But how does this perfectionism play into this, and how does it translate more generally into business?
So I ran a study of about 1,000 companies of what I call the fiscally elite across all types of industries, from pizza shops to manufacturers to professional services, and found out what the best of the best companies performed as in regards to profitability and other components of their business, the financial components. And I documented them. I also explained in the book that you can find the perfect numbers for you. But as I've been going through Profit First now, we have about 30,000 companies, that's our best estimate, running this process. We found that companies that struggle getting started with Profit First try to find the perfect numbers. What percentages should they be allocating? What should they be targeting? As opposed to just getting started. And here's the goal in Profit First: just get started. If you don't know what your profit should be, that's okay. Let's start off by allocating 1% of your income, and then next quarter, 90 days from now, let's go to 2 or 3%, and you'll find your threshold. Once you find your threshold, then we got to become innovative and push it some more. But if you're trying to figure out the perfect numbers, the perfect percentages to allocate, but not starting the system, that's where you're falling off the edge.
And I think that your books really resonate with me. I feel like you're speaking directly to me. And the reason I wanted to bring up this topic for the podcast, and that is perfectionism, not just in allocating in these different accounts, but perfectionism in general is hindering a lot of us in business. And I like to say that I get stuck in the ready, aim syndrome. And I think what you're saying here is, look, profit first, it doesn't need to be as complex as we try to make everything. We need to just set it up and we need to be moving forward. And once we're moving forward, well, then we can gain momentum. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. We're almost talking shoot, ready, aim. I mean, just set up an account, start allocating, and then we can start digging into the actual numbers. But we got to get this habit going first.
I love it. Okay, number 3, I want to talk about debt. And in a moment of true transparency, you talk about watching Susie Orman at 3 a.m., not sure if there were Cheetos and beer involved, but you came to a realization. The solution to debt is simple. If you want to get out of debt, you must get more enjoyment out of saving your money than you do spending your money. And this was a light bulb moment for me, Mike. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, that was my light bulb moment too. And it's so funny. I was just watching television recently and Susie Orman came on again. This is almost 10 years after that first time. And guess what? She's preaching the same concept. Money is an emotional game. We say it's logical, and we then therefore argue that all the decisions we make around money are logical. They're not. They're emotional. And if we realize that and we change our decision from getting joy out of spending, but decide to get joy out of saving, there'll be a fundamental shift in our business. Our business will become more profitable, and more profitability translates to more sustainability and less stress. It is an emotional decision, and you have to talk to yourself maybe on a daily basis and say, I get more value and more joy out of saving than I do spending. And that shift will start to happen.
And this is something that's not going to happen overnight, right? I mean, I'm looking at all of us who have gone through MBA programs or have grown up in the traditional business world. This is emotional. Talking about business in an emotional sense and not that analytic sense is really something that we've got to, it's deep ingrained in us and we've got to get rid of it. We've got to wear it down.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that's the challenge that people face with profit first. Because I'm saying you take your profit first, and no one's ever heard of that before in the business space. But here's the thing I want you to realize. This is nothing new. This is the pay yourself first system. This is a system that's being preached to individuals for savings for millennium. The richest book, The Richest Man in Babylon, a very popular book. Think and Grow Rich, an extraordinarily popular book, all talk about savings first. So I do realize it's going to be hard to change that habit, but to make it a little bit easier, I want you to know this ain't brand new. It's not a shot in the dark. This is something that's worked for millenniums. I'm just applying it to your business now.
And what I think you do so well in both the books that I've read, and that is you make it relatable to us. Like I felt like I was reading a textbook at the same time I was reading a engaging novel. I mean, I could take apart each chapter and work on it one chapter at a time, but I also felt like I couldn't put it down. Like the story kept going and kept captivating me. And when we get to your next book, I'll share just a little bit more of that story. But before we transition, I wanted to focus one last minute on being the best. And in Profit First, you talk about this idea that to grow the biggest and the fastest, you need to be the best at one thing you do and become the best at something. You need to be first determined what you're best at and then do it a whole lot better. And so I think this is a great transition to the pumpkin plan. But before we go there, what do you mean by being the best?
You know, it isn't fair, but a disproportionate award always goes to the best. The classic analogy we've all heard is the person that wins the gold at the Olympics is 0.01 milliseconds faster than the person that gets the silver, and the people that never get remembered and get forgotten were only 0.04 milliseconds slower, or whatever it is. The difference is so minute, but the effort to make that one last step is extraordinary. I know that everyone listening to this is the best at something, but when you step into that category, there's other people that are best at that. And this is where you need to turn up the heat. The funny thing is you're not going to see massive progress in yourself. You're going to make what seems to be incremental progress, but it's in those increments at the final end of being the best. It's those increments that make you extraordinarily better from the consumer's vantage point than everyone else, and disproportionately you will be rewarded. You will be more profitable than anyone else. And by the way, we see this in every business. I looked at the soda industry. Coke and Pepsi make so much more profit than any other competitors combined because they are just that much better. They're that much better at marketing. They're that much better at so many elements of their business. And that's what you get. You get all the profits because you're just that much better than everyone else.
Well, how does the first mover play into this? Because I look at a company like Coca-Cola and gaining that market share and that momentum by being first and foremost different, and then being first to really, gain that momentum. And now you can't stop them. I mean, they're a locomotive. How does being first play into that?
Yeah. So you touched on the key word, which is different. When you're first means you are the first to introduce something, which means you're different. Different is the biggest advantage we have. I actually have a saying, better is not better as much as different is better. So what makes you truly unique? That is inevitably your best part, and exploit that. When you're different, the world notices because there is no alternative. Of course, nowadays, particularly, you got to move super quick. Uber came out with something that was radically different, but Lyft came in swooping behind them. So the first mover advantage is very short-lived nowadays, but you do need to exploit those differences in the biggest way possible.
Yeah, and we didn't set this up, but this actually moves directly into the pumpkin plan, because the first thought that I wanted to talk about on the pumpkin plan is be extreme. But before I ask you that, let me just give a little background. The pumpkin plan is our book of the month this month. We've been diving into it. Every episode of the podcast this month, we have taken a section of it and we've talked about it. I love the analogy. And Mike, one of the things that I told the listening audience is this book has been the #1 most recommended guest interview book on my podcast. And so I kept putting off reading it because I thought I got it. I said, I understand. Yeah. You got these pumpkins growing. You got a few that are small. You cut off the small ones. You let the big one grow. I got it. I don't need to read a $15 book to get it.
Right.
But I bought the book, and I got to tell you, you got to read the book to get it. And so with that kind of background, I want to talk about 4 things. I love the pumpkin plan. I think Profit First is an actionable book. I think it's one that you must read as a business owner and as an entrepreneur. You need to really get a handle on paying yourself first. I think it gives you a lot of steps to go through, but the pumpkin plan, I think, really just ties it up so beautifully. It's actually one of the best books I've ever read. And so let's jump in and talk about the first thing, and that is be extreme. So let me give you a quote from the book and then have you expound a little bit. To grow a successful business, your company must be irresistibly magnetic. The average lose and are left to rot. It's the most unique, the best who win. There is something absolutely irresistible, something magnetic about being the extreme. Another way you can create a new curve is to put EST on what you already do. There's no competing with the est, so get on that. You'll create your own curve in no time. So can you expound on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, if I asked you, hey, Jake, who do you think is the funniest comedian? Who's the fastest swimmer or runner? I'm sure pictures pop in your mind. Maybe Michael Phelps for the swimmer, maybe Usain Bolt for the runner, maybe Jim. Now I can't think of a comedian, but
Gaffigan, Seinfeld.
Jim Gaffigan. That's Jim Gaffigan. Yeah. So maybe Jim Gaffigan or whoever you select. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of comedians. There's thousands and thousands of swimmers and runners. But we pick one picture that defines that person. And inevitably, it is the EST, which is the superlative, the most of something. Now, here's the beautiful thing I found as I was researching this out. You can win not by always being the same or not competing against the current defined EST. So, for example, in swimming, yes, you can be the fastest swimmer, but you can be the craziest swimmer. You can be the splashiest swimmer. If you return on the Olympics and someone, like all the swimmers were diving in, but one swimmer cannonballs in, guess who's going to dominate the news that night? Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to make you famous permanently, but the EST brings attention. So if you do something that's the most extreme of something, you are guaranteed attention. How you manage it going forward is the critical component of turning that attention into business.
And you talk about the swimming in the Olympics, and if you recall from these last Olympics, Michael Phelps was making his comeback, but there was some other swimmers. One guy had his hair dyed all differently. One guy really took an aggressive, arrogant stance, really different from Phelps. And that was their way of distinguishing so that the audience would pay attention to them and make them stand out a little bit. I still remember those two, even though Phelps won the race. So I completely understand and get what you're saying. The question is, as we work towards being the best, this is a mindset shift, I think, for a lot of business owners, because when we talk about profit first, we're talking about just living paycheck to paycheck. Now we're not just talking about paycheck to paycheck. We're talking about being best about something. And so how do we make that mental transition from paycheck to paycheck to being the best?
Yeah, so they work hand in hand. Paycheck to paycheck puts you into survivability mode. It means I will do anything for anybody because I need to make money desperately. It's kind of like the stages of survival. You need food and water and air. For a business, we need the blood of money. And once we get the money in control, then is the opportunity to stand out and be distinct. The funny thing is, when businesses are surviving check by check, they can't think about being the best. It's too hard. And then they stay in that common trap. They try to make money by being a generalist, do anything for anybody, which, by the way, is the definition of a generalist, just to make money. So you got to get your profit under control. And you just learned how to do that. Then you got to stand out, because if you remain a generalist attracts the general audience who generally won't pay a premium. But a specialist, someone that offers something that's really unique, attracts a special audience who will go to extraordinary measures to acquire those services because they see their circumstances as life-threatening to the business and want the specialist. The best always attract the best customers. So that's why we need to do it. And you got to get your finances straightened out first in order to make that step to being the best.
And the best clients end up being less headaches, less customer support, less all of that. They sell themselves because you're in line. And this is really what Pumpkin Plan really talks about. And that is finding your best client, getting in line with them, and providing the services they need. This transitions perfectly to the second topic I wanted to mention. That is, be in the game. And the quote from the book is this: "The key to explosive growth is competing reasonably well in every area your competition competes in, and then blowing them away in one category. Be in the ballpark for everything you do except for one thing. For that one thing, swing for the fences." And I think, Mike, that's just what we talked about. That is, when you're a generalist, you've got to be there so you're recognized. You got to be doing the stuff that people in your field do. But you got to identify that one unique selling proposition or that one unique characteristic that sets you apart.
Yeah. So, this reminds me of Uber versus taxis. Why is Uber and now Lyft and similar services beating up on the traditional taxi cab driver? Well, they hit one thing out of the park. It's convenience. You can be literally anywhere on a street corner, push a button, and usually within minutes or less now, there is a car available to ride. Are their cars extraordinarily clean all the time? No, you get some pretty beat up cars occasionally. Are the drivers always the nicest people? No. I mean, it can be pretty comparative to taxi cab drivers. Maybe they're a little bit cleaner. Sometimes you get a hunker. Sometimes the service is a little bit nicer. Sometimes a little bit worse. But the convenience blows away having to sit on a corner hoping a taxi cab drives by. In our businesses, we need to pick the one thing where we're going to crush the competition. Now, you got to stay in the game elsewhere. If the Ubers drove up and they smelled like skunk every single time, that would be so out of a reasonable competitive range, we would never consider them. The cars are good. The convenience is extraordinary. So compete and be in the ballpark with your competition on everything, but then pick that one thing, your best thing, and just blow it out of the park. And don't just do a little bit better. Customers can't see it. I suggest being 10 times better. It's a real simple math equation. Does Uber get to me 10 times faster than a taxi or better? Because if it does, then Uber's going to win me every single time on that category.
That's a great rule of thumb, this 10 times better. And I think I can hear the audience asking as they're listening to this, how do I identify that one thing that I can be better or different or the EST in? And I tell you, you got to pick up the book because, Mike, you walk through it on how to, poll your customers and talk to them and really identify who they are, distinguish the good ones from the bad ones, and then find out what the good ones want. So I'm not going to go into that. What I want to do is go into asking better questions. And so lead into this with a quote for you. A pumpkin planter's success is not having better answers. It's in asking better questions, better defining the problem. And then you go into how your brain goes to work on questions. You ask it, good, bad, or indifferent. And I believe this is so critical. In fact, I think this is one of the most important things I pulled out of the pumpkin plan, and that is asking better questions. Can I get you to elaborate a little bit on what this means?
Yeah, so questions stages for the answers. So if I ask something really simple about my business, saying, how do I get one more customer? And I ruminate on how to get one more customer. Well, I'll find an answer for it and I'll get one more customer and the answer will be satisfied and I'm done. But if I say, how do I scale my business 10 times the size it is currently? Well, that's a big question. And the answers come back are radically different. So questions dictate our answers. Now, here's the beautiful thing about human nature is how our minds work. It just kind of chugs away at it. That there's a reason when you're sleeping in the middle of the night and all of a sudden you pop up and say, oh my God, I've got the answer. It's because your mind's chugging away at it. There's a reason when you're in the shower and you're just kind of drifting off and all of a sudden, click, it just pops and there's the answer. It's because your mind is working at it on a subconscious level. So stage big, powerful questions. Be very selective of the questions you ask. Your mind will automatically start chugging away at it, and you may surprise yourself with the answer.
This is something I absolutely believe in, and I got to tell you, not for the visual of the audience, but I wanted to take 2 showers today as I was preparing for this podcast because I wanted to make sure I had thought it all out in my mind, and I agree with you when you're doing other things, when your mind is not 100% like trying, like if sometimes when you're trying too hard, the answers won't come. But when you relax a little bit, there it comes. And that's why I think this is such a critical thing for all of the listeners is to really ask yourself positive, reaffirming questions that allow you to create an answer. Not yes, no questions and not diminishing questions, but expanding proactive questions. And so I love that. The final topic that I want to talk about in the pumpkin plan, and this is scaling your business. And I love this. You talk about you cannot scale your business if that means you do most or even some of the work, period. In fact, if you want to grow a serious business, a pumpkin planned business, it requires you don't do any of the work. And I got to tell you, Mike, I love the sound of this, but as I've thought about this and how I wanted to talk to you about it, I started to ask myself if this was a little extreme.
Yeah. So it is extreme, but it's only the extreme businesses that catch that kind of momentum and scale to magnificent size, if that's what you desire. Now, first things first, this isn't the mandatory path of an entrepreneur. Maybe you want to be in your business doing something all the time. That's fine. It means you won't scale to the size of Amazon. Jeff Bezos isn't sitting there processing your order when you place it on Amazon. He's selectively directing the company at a very high level, and we have to move to that. Now, let me tell you another thing. You don't just switch that switch and say, okay, now I'm going to work on the business exclusively, and I'm not going to be in the business. It's more of a dial. In fact, I had this conversation with Michael Gerber. He's the author of The E-Myth, and his thesis of his book is do not work in the business, work on the business. But I met him for dinner, and I said, Michael, I got to challenge you on this. You say work on, not in, but it comes across like it's a switch. Like one day it just switches. I think it's more of a dial. And he's a unique bird. He said some flowery words first, and then we discussed it, and we came to an agreement that this is a throttling process. So you have to keep on selectively removing yourself from the business. Here's the deal: no longer asking your business what needs to be done. Start asking who can do what needs to be done, and you'll start selectively removing yourself to the point where now you can start scaling your business dramatically.
And one of the things you talk about in the book, and you say, believe as much in your business as you do in yourself, or love your business as much as you love what you're doing in your business, and understand that you can grow. And I'm really glad that you unpacked that for me, because everything else in the book, I was right on board with you. But my question was, how about me as a speaker and as a writer and as a podcaster? I want to be in my business, not just working on my business, but like you said, you choose that dial. And this takes us a full circle back around to Profit First, because in Profit First, you talk about how one of the key steps to finding that profitability is sometimes us as business owners, we need to get more into our business. We need to work in our business a little bit more, because overhead of employment is one of our biggest expenses that's reducing our profit.
Yeah, that can be a big part of it. And I think one misperception that people get around the pumpkin plan is that that's the only path. It's a massive size. And the point I'm making is we can determine the size of our pumpkin, our business, and we can design the nature of it. I too love podcasting, and I get such joy out of it that's something I want to do, at least for now, permanently. And so that I insert myself in that component of the business. Now, conversely, when you're just starting up, you're right. You do have to do everything, but there's elements that you do because you have to, and there's elements you do because you love to. The first thing to peel back is the stuff that you have to. Find other people to do it. And I'm not saying you have to hire a full-time employee. This could be virtual help. This could be simple automation. It could be part-time work, but start sloughing that stuff off. The second thing also to consider is, do you even need to do it in the first place? Something that got you to this existing point in your business today may no longer be necessary. So we have to have the courage of removing kind of those hanging chads that are still around. But I also believe do what you love to do. We got one pass this earth. We all know it. Why not do what you love to do? And if it doesn't mean you have the next Amazon, well, that's cool with me. I'm surely not aspiring for that. I just want to be in a business where every day I love coming to work. I love what I do.
Perfect way to end this discussion of the Pumpkin Plan and Profit First. If anyone listening hasn't been convinced that you need both these books, then I suggest you hit rewind and listen to this episode again. Not only are these two books must reads, I believe that they are must rereads. I think you need to reread them a couple of times. I loved Pumpkin Plan. I loved Profit First. Mike, I think you're a great author. I think you're doing some amazing stuff. I appreciate your time with us, but I can't let you go until I ask you six quick questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Lay them on me.
This is my favorite part of the podcast. What we're doing with all the interview guests is just hitting them with a section called Learning from Leaders, 6 rapid fire questions, just to get to know you just a little bit more. And so, are you ready?
Lay it on me.
Book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Just repurchased The Goal. I had that on a Kindle. I got the print cover. Probably the best book of all time when it comes to manufacturing businesses, and now I believe any type of business.
Best movie ever made?
Terminator 2. Everyone knows that. We don't even have to discuss it.
First time recommended. What is your leadership superpower?
Culture. Like, I am a cheerleader for my team. I love the people I work with. And so I'd say my superpower is cheerleader, and it's resulted in a wildly cool culture here.
And by you having such a passion about what you're doing, it resonates in your voice. It communicates through your books. It's just wonderful. Can you share a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra with us?
Yeah. So I think this was Oscar Wilde who said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." I mean, that speaks the essence of us and the essence of our business. Be unique. Be yourself.
One of my favorite parts of Profit First, you talk about your daughter bringing out the piggy bank. We don't have time to talk about that. But if you could leave just one leadership trait to your kids, what would it be?
It's passion. It's passion. I mean, among all things, I am so passionate for what I do. I get such joy and satisfaction out of it. Quite frankly, I don't care if my children ever become a leader of an organization or become an entrepreneur, or I don't care what they do, as long as they're passionate about what I do, because that's where satisfaction and joy comes from.
Well, wonderful. The final question, I believe you've already answered. Best book ever written. You said The Goal. Do you want to stick with that?
Yeah, I got to stick with it. I think it may be the best book ever written. Think and Grow Rich is the runner-up.
Well, and I think that we've got to put a couple of Pumpkin Plan and Profit First up there. You've done a great job. Mike, where can we find out more about you, connect with you, and of course, where can we get your books?
Oh, thank you. So books, of course, are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's favorite bookstore. But if you want to check out more about me, I used to write for the Wall Street Journal. I have all my articles available for download. Everything's up there, free chapters. Go to MikeMichalowicz.com. Now, here's the shortcut. If you don't know how to spell it, nor do most people. Go to Mike Motorbike. That was my nickname in high school. Go to MikeMotorbike.com. It'll forward you on, and you can get all that stuff, plus my podcast.
Wonderful. And I will link all that up in the show notes. And I want you to know, Mike, in a couple of podcast episodes, I mispronounced your name. And the audience knows that.
You ain't the first.
But I made sure for this interview, I researched, I have it all written out phonetically so that I never want to mistake it again. Mike, your time is valuable. You've given us so much of it. I appreciate what you're doing, the writing that you're doing, the difference that you're making in the business and entrepreneurial space. Thank you for being a part of the Modern Leadership Podcast.
Jake, thank you.
Hey, my friends, how was that? I got to tell you, I've spent the last couple of weeks preparing for this interview. I've been so excited to sit down with Mike. I devoured both of his books back to back, and they really resonated with me. I mean, as a struggling, growing small business myself, working on building my own profit-first strategy, they really resonated with me, and I was so excited to get him on the podcast. You know, anytime we can get a monthly book club member on the podcast, I just love it. Now, you may have heard a couple of times through the podcast where the audio kind of wavered a little bit. And I got to tell you, that was on my end. I'm here in Scotland this week, and the Airbnb that we're staying at has not had the most reliable Wi-Fi. I've got everything turned off, and we still are struggling, waving back and forth. But I think we've got enough good quality content that I'm going to patch it all together, edit out the parts that are a little bit squiggly, and release it. I think that there was so much value in there. I cannot thank Mike enough for being on the podcast. My key takeaways today: don't do what everyone else is doing. You got to be the EST. You got to be the best or the fastest or the smartest or the most original. You got to be different. You got to stand out. Second key takeaway: sales minus expenses equals profit. Not the way, that's what we've always talked about, right? For Mike, it's sales minus profit equals expenses. Only spend what you have after profit. Now, we didn't get into it, the percentages, too much in the podcast, so you got to go and get the book. But he even says, look, start with 1%. Take 1% profit. And in the podcast, he talked about if you make $1, take out a penny. Make that your profit, because you're starting a habit. You're starting in the right direction. And that habit, that momentum that we talk about, will grow and take you on. So I love that. And then finally, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. You got to be different. You got to stand out from the crowd. If you want to be the best, if you want to be successful, if you want to have everything 10x your life, then you know you've got to be a little bit different. You've got to take a different path. And that different path will make you unique. It'll make you likable. It'll make you noticeable. People will want to be around you if you do that. Now, we talked about a lot. Everything we talked about in this episode, you can snag over on the show notes page, jakeacarlson.com/ML8. ML8 for Modern Leadership 8 will get you to the show notes where you can connect with Mike. You can pick up his books. You can see the quote, the movie, everything that we talked about. Also, you can still win the great prizes available for the Modern Leadership Kickoff Party. Just head over to jakeacarlson.com/win and join in. Don't forget, share with a friend. Second, if you want to 10x your growth this year, you got this, and I can help you. A few of us in the Elite Achievement Academy are driving to our best year ever. And to get more information or to join in, head over, one more email address or one more web address, jakeacarlson.com/10x growth. Okay. A lot going on. We got the show notes. We've got the way to win. We've got the Elite Achievement Academy. So much going on. The easiest thing to do is just head over to the website. We're collecting it all there for you. Easy to have, easy to handle. Next week on the Modern Leadership Podcast, we continue our leadership superpower discussion, and we talk about the inspirational leader. How inspiring. We're going to love this. I will see you there, but until then, I want you to have a great day, make a great life, start growing those pumpkins, and stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.